안녕하세요. 전국의 이 차별금지법 바로알기 아카데미 시청해 주시는 성도 여러분, 국민 여러분, 반갑습니다. 저희가 지난번에 방송할 때는 2020년이었는데 지금은 어느덧 21년이 됐습니다. 새해 첫 방송에 여러분께 이렇게 인사드리게 돼서 정말 감사하고 반갑습니다. 저희 차바 촬영 및 송출 스태프들이 또 코로나19의 방역 문제 때문에 업무를 수행할 수 없는 사정이 갑자기 발생했습니다. 그래서 연말 연시에 원래 금요일에 휴일이어서 두 번의 이 휴방이 예정돼 있었는데 한 번 더 돼서 지금까지 3주 동안 사실은 저희 아카데미 방송을 이렇게 방송 못하게 돼서 꽤 길게 느껴졌습니다. 여러분, 벌써 새해가 바뀌었습니다. 새해에도 지난해 우리 차바 강의를 계속 시청해 주시고 기도해 주시고 물심양면으로 후원해 주신 성도 여러분, 국민 여러분 정말 감사드리고요. 새해에도 또 동일한 동참과 협력과 후원을 요청드리겠습니다. 저희 오늘 이제 새해 첫 방송을 하기 전에 잠깐 그동안 지난 3주 동안 우리 차바 시청해 주시는 성도 여러분, 국민 여러분께서 후원해 주신 그 후원금의 내역과 송금 내역을 잠깐 여러분께 좀 광고 말씀드리겠습니다. 지금 여러분께서 지난주 12월에 두 번의 방송이 있었는데요. 해외에 영국의 크리스찬 칸슨 윌버포스 아카데미의 안드레아 윌리엄스가 영국의 평등법, 차별금지법에 대한 총 강의를 해주셨죠. 그리고 또 크리스찬 칸슨이 재정적인 좀 어려움이 있다고 해서 저희가 후원금을 보내주시면 송금하겠다고 말씀드렸습니다. 지난 12월 말 기준으로 많은 분들이 이 후원에 동참을 해주셨습니다. 무려 70여 분께서 보내주셨고 또 크고 작은 후원금 모아서 600여만 원이 사실은 상회했습니다. 이 금액 어제 영국으로 송금을 했습니다. 근데 새해에도 계속 조금 후원으로 영국 후원을 보내주신 분이 있어서 어쨌든 보내주시면 저희가 한 달 단위로 끊어서 계속 조금 송금해 드리도록 이렇게 하겠습니다. 그리고 또 하와이의 광야교회 한명덕 목사님 교회에도 후원해 주시는 분들이 있어서 26분의 이 후원금도 송금을 해드렸습니다. 여러분, 우리나라에서뿐만 아니라 전 세계 각지에서 이 차별금지법, 평등법과의 전쟁은 계속되고 있습니다. 전 세계에 우리의 동역자들이 있습니다. 그분들 위해서 함께 기도해 주시고 이 싸움 우리만의 싸움이 아니라는 것을 여러분 기억해 주시고 특히 우리 대한민국에서는 이미 법이 제정된 다른 나라의 사례를 잘 반면교사로 삼아서 대한민국에서는 이 법의 저지를 성공적으로 막아내는 저지를 해내는 그런 교회와 국가 될 수 있도록 여러분 계속 기도해 주시면서 동참해 주시면 좋겠습니다. 오늘 제가 인터넷 송출하면서도 이 마스크를 쓰는 이유는 정부의 방침상 특히 종교의 시설에 해당하는 경우에 전문 방송이 아닌 경우 설교자도 마스크를 쓰도록 지침이 내려왔기 때문에 그렇습니다. 우리 차별금지법 바로알기 아카데미도 선교의 활동으로 지금 활동하고 있기 때문에 종교의 활동으로 이렇게 해석될 여지가 있어서 저희가 정부의 방역 조치에 적극 협력한다는 차원에서 진행하는 분들 또 여기 돕는 스태프분들 모두 철저하게 방역 조치를 한다는 차원에서 부득이 저희가 마스크를 좀 착용했다는 점 이해해 주시면 좋겠습니다. 그리고 오늘 이제 다음 강사를 소개해 올리겠습니다. 오늘 첫 강의를 담당해 주실 분은 제프리 벤트렐라라는 이미 프리뷰 영상에서도 보셨지만 미국 ADF라는 조직의 부회장입니다. 제가 이 제프리 벤트렐라 이 변호사신데요. 이분을 처음 뵌 것은 2016년 영국에 안드레아 윌리엄스가 운영하는 윌버포스 아카데미에 연수 갔을 때 그때 강사로 오셨습니다. 그때 처음 뵙고 저희가 그해 10월 달쯤 미국의 피터 존스 목사님의 그 크리스천 컨선이라고 하는 트루스 익스체인지라고 하는 동성애 반대 세미나에 참여하고 거기서 얼마 떨어져 있는 아리조나주에 있는 이 ADF도 방문을 했었습니다. 그때 2016년에 방문했을 때에도 저희 한국 방문단에게 ADF를 자세히 소개를 해 주시고 또 통역에 대한 의사를 표명해 주신 분이기도 합니다. ADF는 풀네임이 Alliance for Defending Freedom이라고 해서 자유수호를 위한 연맹, 이런 의미를 가지고 있습니다. 미국의 애리조나주의 주도인 그 피닉스 시티에 본부가 있는데요. 수십 명의 변호사들과 그다음에 스태프들과 동역을 하고 있는 전국에서 차별금지법이나 기독교의 복음에 배치되는 악법에 맞서서 교회와 국가들을 돕는 사역을 열심히 하고 있습니다. 회장님은 알렌 시어즈라는 분이신데 이 벤트렐라 변호사는 여기에 교육 담당 부회장이 되셔서 전 세계에 이런 기독교 복음에 기한 반복음적인 악법, 특히 대표적으로 차별금지법을 막는 강연 활동에 앞장서 주고 계시고 또 젊은이들로 하여금 복음적인 교육을 시켜서 공적인 영역에 이렇게 들어가도록 하는 교육 과정에도 헌신해 주고 계신 분입니다. 한국에는 여러 차례 오셔서 한국에도 이런 ADF라는 조직이 만들어질 수 있도록 많이 돕고 권면하고 그러셨습니다. 그래서 여러모로 자극을 받고 또 영감을 얻은 한국의 변호사들이 작년에 지금 반복음적인 악법을 막기 위한 법률가들 모임인 복음법률가회가 작년 7월에 창립됐는데 사실은 이 복음법률가의 창립에 가장 큰 도전적 계기를 제공해 준 분이 또 ADF의 이 제프리 벤트렐라 변호사라고도 할 수 있습니다. 2019년에는 한국 교회에 와서 이미 프리뷰 영상에서 방송된 바 있는 국회에서 젠더 이데올로기에 대한 비판 학술 대회를 할 때 메인 강사로도 활용한 바 있습니다. 여러분 이 강의에 이제 원문이 있고 밑에 번역이 있습니다. 그 번역은 우리 전윤성 변호사가 정말 수고해 주셨습니다. 메인 발음이 영어로 가고 자막으로 되어 있기 때문에 실제로는 한국 강의보다 좀 강의에 더 집중하시기가 용이하지 않은 면이 있습니다. 그럼에도 불구하고 여러분 한번 강의를 한 40분 정도 되는 강의입니다. 집중해서 끝까지 잘 들어주시면 이 차별금지법이 미국에서 실제로는 어떻게 성경의 핵심 가치인 공정한 하나님의 공의와 공정을 해치는지에 대한 심각성을 우리가 알게 될 수 있고 이것이 하나님께서 우리에게 주신 자유, 특히 신앙의 자유를 얼마나 파괴하는지도 우리가 잘 이해할 수 있으며 이것을 해소하기 위해서 크리스찬들이 특히 크리스찬 법률가들이 무엇을 해야 하는지에 대해서도 한국에게 주는 정확한 메시지를 우리 벤트렐라 변호사님이 부회장님이 잘 전달해 주고 계십니다. 여러분 이 한국에 처음으로 차별금지법에 초점을 맞춰서 새해 처음에 우리 벤트렐라 부회장님 강의를 하게 된 것을 영광으로 생각합니다. 여러분 이 강의 집중해서 들어주시고 또 여러분 차별금지법 막는데 귀하게 활용해 주시기를 당부드립니다. 우리 벤트렐라 교수님의 강의를 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Greetings to everyone. You are some of my favorite people, and it's my great privilege to again having the opportunity to be able to address those in the Republic of South Korea, particularly on behalf of the Alliance for Gospel Advocacy. My task today is to address discrimination, disagreement, and dissent, and to particularly focus on when good intentions produce great wrongs. Modern society still reflects ugly conduct, and this is certainly true in the United States. A friend of mine, for example, his daughter is half Asian, and upon returning to school after a COVID quarantine, she's insulted and bullied for having spread the, quote, Wuhan pandemic. She's not Chinese. She's half Japanese. I have Korean friends that have had the same insults hurled at them during this COVID time. And then, of course, unique to the United States is the experience of black American men who are statistically subject to more frequent police stops, more frequent questioning, and sometimes abuse and even murder. It is a demonstrable fact that acts of invidious discrimination do exist in many levels of society. On the one hand, that shouldn't be surprising because as Christians we understand that the world is fallen and people are fallen and sinful behavior results from that. But on the other hand, as Christians called to be salt and light, we can personally and we can publicly effect change to minimize, to reduce, and in some ways eliminate the effects of the fall in these areas of life. For example, we engage in medicine to reduce suffering and to save lives. We engage in economic development to produce, for example, an abundance of food, to raise people from poverty. And we engage in the public square, including politics and law, so that we can be ruled by governments of law, not dictatorships of men. And my purpose today is to help us to think Christianly about acts of discrimination using the United States experiment to evaluate these kinds of things and to look at proposed legal remedies to them. I'm going to give you three perspectives. First, I want us to understand the important theological foundations. Second, I want to show how those foundations should inform justice and thereby shape the law and the public square. And thirdly, I want to assess some efforts showing that in many cases in the United States, despite good intentions with so-called non-discrimination laws, they create great wrongs. So let's begin with the theological considerations. Let's first focus on God and His character. Deuteronomy 10:17. For the Lord, your God, is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God, who is not partial. 2 Chronicles 19:7. Now then, let the fear of the Lord be upon you. Be careful what you do, for there is no injustice with the Lord our God, or partiality. Job 34:19. God who shows no partiality to princes, nor regards the rich more than the poor. Why? For they are all the work of his hands. Peter says in Acts chapter 10, truly I understand that God shows no partiality. Romans 2:11. For God shows no partiality. Galatians 2:6. God shows no partiality. Luke 20:21. So they asked him, Jesus, teacher, we know that you speak and teach rightly and show no partiality, but truly teach the way of God. God shows no partiality in his character. Secondly, what about justice? Private justice. Job 13:8. Ask a rhetorical question. Will you show partiality? The answer, of course, implied is no. Job 13:10. He will surely rebuke you if in secret you show partiality. Job 32:21. I will not show partiality to any man. Malachi 2:8. So I will make you despised and abased before all people. Why? Inasmuch as you do not keep my ways, but show partiality. 1 Timothy 5:21. I charge you to keep these rules without prejudging. Do nothing from partiality. James 2:1. My brothers, show no partiality. James 2:9. But if you show partiality, you are committing sin. And then we see this same theme extends not only to our private lives, but to the law and to the court system, publicly, law and policy. Exodus 23:3. Nor shall you be partial to the poor man in his lawsuit. Leviticus 19:15. You shall do no injustice in court. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great, but in righteousness you shall judge your neighbor. Deuteronomy 1:17. You shall not be partial in judgment. You shall hear the small and the great alike. Deuteronomy 16:19. You shall not pervert justice. How? You shall not show partiality. Psalm 82:2. How long will you judge unjustly? How? And show partiality. Proverbs 18:5. It is not good to be partial to the wicked or to deprive the righteousness of justice. Proverbs 24:23. Partiality in judging is not good. Proverbs 28:31. To show partiality is not good. And then Paul puts this whole point with respect to employment relationships. He says, masters or employers, do the same. Stop threatening those who work for you. There shall be no partiality because of who God is. Colossians 3:25, there shall be no partiality. I think it's clear then, because God is impartial, because God calls us to be impartial in all of our conduct, whether private or in the public sphere, and because to do otherwise perverts justice and fails to follow God's ways, we must therefore assess all legal anti-discrimination efforts through that particular lens. Sometimes they pass muster, other times they do not. Otherwise, in the hope or the pretext of doing some good, we can actually be doing harm, as the scripture says, perverting justice by codifying partiality. Good intentions done with the wrong means produce wrong ends. For example, if you do music, you know that if you play the right note at the wrong time, it does not produce beautiful music. And so our business must be about public justice, but public justice that is rightly configured, rightly ordered as to the proper means and ends. How does that work, and why should we do it? Writing in 1981, one commentator put it this way, again using starkly biblical and inescapably political and legal terminology. He said, Jesus Christ is Lord. That is the first and final assertion Christians make about all reality, including politics. Believers now assert by faith what will one day be manifest in the sight of all. Every earthly sovereignty, and by that he means states, nations, etc., is subordinate to the sovereignty of Jesus Christ. End quote. Politics and law per se cannot be dirty because Jesus himself holds a political and legal office. He is the Lord. Another scholar put it this way, the Christian faith is either relevant to all of life or it is relevant to none of it. The claims of God are either total or he is not God. To ask Christianity to stay in its own territory is to ask it to stay in all of life. And that would include a faithful presence in the public square dealing with law, policy, politics, and the human good. So then what would be the aim of this faithful presence if it's rightly ordered? What should be the trajectory of a rightly ordered political and legal power? What is the thematic direction, and what should the Christian propose to seek to influence law and public policy? Scholar Daniel Dreisbach describes this vector in the motif of a God-shaped and a gospel-shaped faithful presence in the political and legal sphere. He says, and I quote, the cause of liberty is the cause of God. God favors and approves the cause of liberty, and tyranny and arbitrary rule are offensive to him. Indeed, a state of tyranny, of slavery, or sin represents a disordering of God's moral structure. Liberty, in short, is the most cherished possession of a free and civilized society. Well, then, how then should we act politically given this creational normative context? Scholar Douglas Farrell crystallizes this by noting, first of all, the impossibility of political or legal neutrality, that we actually have political and legal marching orders. He says, first, we must offer a potent and relentless critique of our society's habitual evasion of truth. What we need to point out to our fellow citizens is that man is not and cannot be philosophically or theologically neutral. Neither then can be our politics, and by implication, our laws. There is no presuppositionalist political sphere, no sphere in which nothing is directly implied about the nature of God or of man. There is no city or polis that has no determinate loves, that makes no commitments, that renders no firm judgment of good or evil, that knows God or not. This is an inescapable political implication of the Christian faith. The state does not address the church or the Christian citizen with an independent authority capable of overruling the law of God, whether we call that the natural law or as the law of Christ. The state performs a limited service both to God and to civil society and can lay claim only to a limited and derivative jurisdiction. And then he concludes, and this gets to the heart of what we want to consider. Are we really to suppose that the state functions best when it concerns itself as little as possible with what is actually right and wrong, actually good or evil, actually conducive to happiness or unhappiness? And by that he means human flourishing. Put differently, Christians cannot commend publicly that which God condemns scripturally if good and evil are to retain their functional and true meanings. To do otherwise perverts justice, even if well intended, because it can import wrongful partiality. Now, John Murray, the theologian, takes all these points and applies them to the very church, that is, that which stewards the gospel. He taught that it was, in fact, the church's role to speak into such circumstances, including using political and legal categories, because those categories express how moral convictions, Christian convictions, can be set forth, proposed, and applied in this public sphere. He says, when laws are proposed or enacted that are contrary to the Word of God, it is the duty of the church to proclaim and in official pronouncement to oppose and condemn them. It is this misconception of what is involved in the proclamation of the whole counsel of God to suppose or to plead that the church has no concern with the political sphere. The church is concerned with every sphere and is obligated to proclaim and to inculcate the revealed will of God as it bears upon every department of life. And so this context that I've just given you gives us a litmus test and a lens for correctly analyzing anti-discrimination and efforts to remediate anti-discrimination, how the law can both help and how it can hurt, particularly as it impacts religious freedom. In the United States today, there are many efforts to limit religious freedom under the guise of, quote, eliminating discrimination, largely driven by LGBTQ interests. And they target particular kinds of professions. For example, they target creative professionals, videographers, bakers, florists, calligraphers, T-shirt printers, and so forth. They also target mercy ministries like adoption agencies, homeless shelters, hospitals, private schools. Now, the rationales that you hear in Twitter and sound bites claim that promoting religious liberty is just a ruse, that it's, quote, a license to discriminate, quote, that it's the effort of, quote, hate groups, quote, that people who promote religious liberty are, quote, on the wrong side of history. Well, we need to assess these claims, and we need to assess the proposed means when they're targeting these kinds of things. For example, we need to recognize that there are differences between things, between one thing and different things. On the one hand, being rational and making decisions, including rational disagreement or even dissent, that's one thing. On the other hand, there is unjust acts and unjust treatment of real people. And in fact, the state should restrict those sorts of things. But that's where we have to analyze it. Put differently, not every decision based on a distinction or a disagreement comprises a wrongful act of invidious discrimination. Let me give you some examples. What if you have a truck hauling company or a shipping company that refuses to hire blind people to drive or pilot a ship? Well, that's not discrimination against handicapped persons. What if you have a professional basketball team that refuses to hire a short and unskilled or even a paralyzed person for their team? That's not wrongful discrimination against a short, handicapped person. What if a TV production studio refuses to hire a black woman to portray President Bill Clinton in a biographical film? Well, that's not wrongful discrimination against women or against black persons. What if parents give money to support their own children and refuse to give money to strangers who identify as LGBTQ? Well, that's not wrongful discrimination against people who identify as LGBTQ. What if you refuse to hire a white person to teach Korean, and that person doesn't teach Korean, and you can make up whatever category it is. The point here is the person, whether white, black, yellow, red, whatever color you like, it's not wrongful discrimination because the person doesn't know Korean, so they certainly can't teach it. Well, what we're seeing in the United States is under the guise of what's called affirmative action, many universities, very top-level universities, have schemes that systematically exclude particularly Asians. There's an ongoing lawsuit now against Harvard, which has discriminated against Asian admissions, and the Justice Department of the United States is now investigating Yale University for the same kind of scheme to systematically exclude and target Asians. We see in California Senate Bill 826, which requires publicly held, publicly traded corporations to have at least one woman on the governing board of directors. There's no rationale for that. It's just kind of a quota-like system. Well, how do we evaluate these kinds of things? And there are many more. Well, we need to understand that good intentions can, in fact, pervert justice, to use the biblical terminology, by showing wrongful partiality contrary to God's law. How? How can we discern these things? What are the clues? What are the indicia? Well, on the one hand, some of these schemes always look to the past to propose some sort of remediation or reparation, instead of having the law clear away obstacles for disadvantaged people, focusing on the future for opportunity. A lot of these schemes will focus on outcomes rather than opportunities. And I believe when they do that, that's going to be a form of wrongful partiality. So we see quota schemes, we see partiality in evaluations of applicants for various things, whether that be education or for preferable loans. And so we see the law picking winners and losers when it shouldn't do that. It should instead create a structure that is fairness and opportunity for all on equal terms. Another way these schemes do this is by employing what I call unbiblical taxonomy, which is typically informed by identity politics, critical theory, critical race theory, cultural Marxism, which conflicts at many levels with a true Christian worldview. For example, treating people only as a member of a group, as a tribe or a clan, not as individuals looking at what they bring to the table or the application. Or they go farther and say, we are going to assert an identity solely based on socially constructed matters, not rooted in reality. This is the concept called intersectionality. We won't go into that, but just be aware of it. But the Christian worldview pushes back on this in at least four ways. First, the Christian worldview affirms and assumes a universal human nature that does not vary as to time, geography, ethnicity, coloration. It's not a fluid construct. We each have a universal human nature. Number two, the Christian worldview assumes and affirms a sexed anthropology consisting of male and female, and that anthropology is immutable, as opposed to what we hear with gender ideology. Third, the Christian worldview valorizes the individual as an individual, not as a tribe, not as a clan, nor as a part of some supposedly oppressed group. And fourthly, the Christian worldview looks at behavior as being morally culpable, not a status. And so we need to evaluate particularized behaviors, not simply the status or an inclusion in a group or not. So what do we see then? We see a targeting of supposed harms. Now, some of these harms are real, but a lot of them are not, of modern anti-discrimination efforts. For example, economic harms. not just creating opportunities, as I alluded to, but actual remediation and reparations for the past, rather than freedom for the future. This could be involved in preferential hiring, in handouts of government welfare and things, preferential loans, preferential favors. All these kinds of things engage in some form of partiality, and so they're suspect. We also see now a new kind of claim in the last decade or so called dignitary harms. The idea here is that there are certain harms when people make a distinction that you can't make that distinction because that makes people feel bad. And so we're seeing laws now mandating public respect and recognition. It's a new sort of creed or orthodoxy. What's important to recognize is that dignitary harm cannot be objectively assessed or evaluated. It's purely subjective. This is the notion of the cancel culture, trigger warnings, and so forth. We also see from the literature that people advancing these things are not just looking at particular perceived harms, but want to actually change the entire social structure. They claim that there is systemic discrimination in all the structures of the United States. And so what they tell us is, and I'm quoting here, one goal is cultural transformation. Another person says it is part of a project of social reconstruction. Its aim is to reshape beliefs and values. Well, that is a problem, I think, when the state is engaging in it. We call it what? Propaganda. And the translator will have the citations to those. So, now how do they do that? How do they then take these ideas, this idea to rearrange culture, to restructure our beliefs and values? Well, they attach it to employment matters in the United States. That's something called Title VII. They attach it to housing matters and that sort of thing. What happens is you have an overly broad solution here. There's legitimate issues in employment and legitimate issues in housing, but when you go overly broad, that is wrongful partiality. But the key area of action today is what's called a public accommodation. Businesses open to the public. In the United States, this stems from that horrific national sin called chattel slavery. As you may know, the United States actually had slavery for many years, and they fought a bloody civil war to end it. So in 1875, after the war was concluded, the notion of public accommodations were opened legally so that people, black and white, could have equal access to them. So, inns and hotels, trains, boats, and theaters. And that continued, though there was a backwash in the southern part of the United States, which was evil, that tried to prevent that and created these schemes of separate but equal and so forth. But in 1964, with the passage of the Civil Rights Act, the notion of public accommodations continued and expanded to areas of hotels, restaurants, theaters, fuel stations, gas stations, and stadiums, anything open to the public in those categories. But today, what's happened is the left has captured this idea, and now that anything that involves any public transaction may be subject to this public accommodation idea. And it's usually tethered to various protected classes. Now, these classes deal with partiality. Sometimes that's fine and good, depending on how it's used and which category. The question is it rooted in reality and metaphysics and not just some favored group? So, in 1875, going back, the idea was to present an openness for future opportunity on equal footing. And so the categories were race or color to involve in this. That's perfectly legitimate and was necessary. 1964, they expanded that a bit, race, color, national origin, and religion, to say, look, we can't really discriminate on those bases in public accommodation. The fact that someone wears a yarmulke and goes to Starbucks and asks for coffee, you can't turn them away because they're wearing a yarmulke. Those kinds of things. So that made a lot of sense. But today what we have is a push to accelerate and expand these various categories, and they're not inherent or metaphysical or tethered to foundational beliefs like religion. So we see things like religion, color, national origin. Okay, that's fine. Age, it gets a little blurry there. Disability, well, it depends on who defines that. Marital status can be very problematic for a church. Maybe your church doesn't want to have members that are in a same-sex marriage. Oh, but you're a public accommodation. And now we have all kinds of categories such as source of income, one's arrest record, physical appearance, sexual orientation, gender identity, political beliefs, familial status, whether you're a student or not, domestic partner, receipt of rental assistance, refusal to disclose Social Security numbers, those kinds of. So you just make these things up, and they're not really dealing with historically oppressed situations. You're just kind of trying to favor, to be partial to other groups. Now, this creates clashes and tensions. For example, 20 years ago, we had a situation where a group for young men called the Boy Scouts, a voluntary association, had a rule that says we're not going to allow LGBT people to be leaders of the Boy Scouts. And that was litigated. It was claimed that was discrimination against the LGBT Scoutmaster leader, but the Boy Scouts said, we don't want someone who has those kinds of attractions to be in tents in the wilderness with young boys. And they won that case in the year 2000, saying there's an associational right. That's not discrimination, that's an associational right. We saw this, of course, go the other way 15 years later in the Obergefell decision, which federalized, constitutionalized same-sex marriage, which then creates a lot of religious liberty issues in the last 5 years, and we'll talk about that. And most recently in 2020, we had the Supreme Court rule that the public accommodation provision of Title VII dealing with employment, it's not public accommodation, but it's the employment aspect of it, included sexual orientation and gender ideology, even though those things are not in the actual text. So what we have to ask is there actual discriminatory acts involved, actual injustice, or is it just someone's saying their feelings are hurt because they claim to be part of a group? And then we have to ask, is the solution biblical or unbiblical in terms of how it shows partiality? Remember that merely disagreeing is not the same as an invidious discriminatory act. Is the focus on the person or on what they've been asked to do? Is it on the message or the status? Is it on a class or is it on celebrating an event? Let me see if I can flesh this out, talking about some of our clients. So, Jack Phillips is a cake artist. He serves everybody that comes into his shop, but he doesn't agree with all messages. And he has been the target of no less than 3 lawsuits, winning 2 of them already, and he's still in the 3rd, where an LGBT couple wanted him to create a special artistic cake for their same-sex ceremony. He refused. He said, I'll sell you anything in my shop, but I can't embrace that message because I'm a Christian. So on and so forth. Or Baronelle Stutzman, who's a floral artist. She served this particular person many times over many, many years, including providing valentines and these kinds of things, but not with respect to a same-sex marriage. And she has been sued and sued and sued, and we're fighting that. It's a religious liberty, sort of that claim. Or Blaine Adamson. Blaine Adamson is a client that produces custom-made T-shirts. He was asked to create a message that affirmed LGBT pride for a pride parade. He said, I can't do that. That's the message I will not do. I will refer you out. You'll get a great T-shirt at the same price or a lower price. And they did, but they still sued him. Now, thankfully, he won at the highest court in the state of Kentucky. Or our clients here in where I am in Arizona, Brush and Nib, they are custom calligraphers, and they will do all kinds of things, but they simply will not do messages for marriages that celebrate same-sex ceremonies. And there's other messages as well. They will not convey, Satanist messages and that sort of thing. They actually won a great decision at the Arizona Supreme Court that we were able to litigate. We have our friends in Minnesota, Telescope Media, and they are custom creative filmmakers. They do weddings, they do custom other kinds of things. They're videographers. And they actually won a great decision at the 8th Circuit after going out on the offensive and saying, look, we need to see what this looks like. We are going to use our artistic, but we're not going to convey messages with which we disagree. We see up in Alaska, Sherry Laurie, our client, is the executive director of a battered woman's abuse shelter. One night, a drunken man came to this center. He's has gender dysphoria. He claims to be a woman. He's certainly not. He was drunk, he was beat up, and he wanted to spend the night with these women who had been physically and sexually abused. Sherry gave him a ride through a taxi service, got him some medical help and those sorts of things. He still sued her, but I'm pleased to say that our team did well and vindicated him. Or consider Dr. Schwartz, who's an Orthodox Jew. He's a psychiatrist. He practices talk therapy. He had adult men come to him, not boys, adult men come to him that struggle with same-sex attraction. He talks to them about this and tries to, consistent with his Jewish faith and his psychiatry, to lessen that through talk therapy, through counseling. He was threatened with criminal sanctions for doing nothing more than talking with his clients. We're grateful that when we pushed on that and pushed back, his religious liberty was in fact preserved, and they changed the rule. So we also have a young student at a university who, on a private Twitter feed, said he is opposed to all forms of racial discrimination, but he believes that the BlackLivesMatter.com group is really contrary to Christianity if you look at their website. He was expelled from being the president of his university's senate, but thanks be to God, we got that turned around at the school senate, and we're continuing there. So, what do we then see today? Well, depending upon who holds the White House and all that sort of thing, there's an act that's been passed but not made law yet. It's been passed by the Senate, I should say by the House of Representatives in the United States. It's called the Equality Act. Now, who could be opposed to the Equality Act? Well, don't go by the title. Look at what it actually does. What that does is it federalizes all public accommodations, extending coverage to the entire menagerie of LGBTQ plus categories as to public accommodations. But it's very harmful and very dangerous and very damaging because the Equality Act contains no religious exemptions for conscience and religious liberty. Moreover, the Equality Act would suppress and negate what's called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which was passed many decades ago, almost unanimously, which provides for preservation. So this act would gut religious liberty so that you only believe in your head, but you can't live your faith. There's another act that's out there, and it's unfortunately gotten some traction with a lot of Christians. It's called Fairness for All. Well, who would be opposed to Fairness for All? But it's interesting, that act is rejected by LGBTQ as not going far enough, but it's also not very good. It doesn't provide fairness for all. It's problematic. So if you hear something like this, Fairness for All, or what's called the Utah Compromise, you need to be very careful with that, and I would suggest you reject it because it fails to cover many Christians. Doesn't cover all Christians. And it fails to cover other individuals for their rights of conscience, individuals that the Bible says are our neighbors. They're also made in the very image and likeness of God. They also have natural rights, and they ought not to be censored or coerced, and that's what this law would permit. Second of all, this Fairness for All claims that the trans issue, gender dysphoria, is a civil rights issue rather than a psychological matter, and that's not a Christian position. Third, Fairness for All fails to protect shelters, for example, of abused women. Sherry Laurie would have had to allow this man to spend the night with these abused and sexually assaulted women. Fourth, it would probably impose the use of preferred personal pronouns, which is not a good thing because pronouns refer to reality. You can't speak that which is inaccurate or a lie. So that's not right. Fifth, it enshrines attractions and behaviors by rejecting Christian ethics, saying that a same-sex attraction, for example, is okay to have and legally protect. Well, that's not really the Christian worldview. So where does this leave us? How do we go forward? Let me give you a few suggestions in closing. First, love the Lord your God with all your being, heart, soul, strength, and mind. Cultivate that mind that can discern these things. Second of all, understand that this true and living God is not partial, and he calls us to impartiality in both attitude and in action. Third, our prime directive is to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, which summarizes the whole point of the Sermon on the Mount. We're to be light and salt, and Jesus says that is to be evident in our good works before men. And those good works are to be consistent and ethical in alignment with the very way of God, the very law of God. Fourth, only then can we rightly love our neighbor consistent with these precepts, including how we engage in law and public policy, including, therefore, eradicating unjust discriminatory acts. Thus, we must oppose invidious discrimination and invidious discriminatory acts, but we must understand it how God defines it and seek to establish justice as God defines it. Psalm 18 tells us that God trains our hands for war. Now, why would he do that? He's not talking about, bazookas and missiles. It's a little bit different than that. Well, I think the answer lies in Isaiah 59. The prophet says, "Justice is turned back, and righteousness stands far away, for truth has stumbled in the public squares." Truth is lacking. The Lord saw it, and it displeased him that there was no justice. He saw that there was no man, and wondered that there was no one to intercede. Do you see the picture? Truth is supposed to be public. It's supposed to be evident. It's supposed to be strong. It's supposed to be stable. And instead it's teetering. It's tottering. It's wobbling. It's falling apart. And this displeases God. But then God wonders, there's no one to intercede. There's no one to stabilize justice in the public square. And he's essentially saying, where are you? It's up to the Christians called to be that steadier of stumbled truth. And that's who we need to be. That's the problem. There was no one to intercede, to remedy injustice, either in effect or in a proposed solution, like certain anti-discrimination laws that target religious expression, religious liberty. Both are aspects of injustice, and both are called for attention by us as Christians. See, God trains us to intercede as fellow workers for the truth, as 3 John 8 says. We are to be fellow workers for the truth, because truth has stumbled. That stumbled truth must be steadied. That is our task. And it's no different when we're dealing with the anti-discrimination regime that's trying to stifle, stunt, and change the very way that we think about these things. May God be true, though all men are liars. I want to give thanks to the translator who did this, a friend of mine, and then I will simply leave you with this. 감사합니다.
네, 여러분 그 벤트렐라 강의 40분 정도 되는 강의인데 여러분 끝까지 잘 시청해 주시느라고 수고 많으셨습니다. 영어로 말하고 있고 또 번역된 글이고 그래서 보통의 그 설교보다는 좀 상당히 그 집중력이 있는 그 청취가 이해를 위해서 요구되는 그런 강의입니다. 저는 이제 2번 정도 이렇게 들었는데요. 여러분도 다시 한번 또 이렇게 복습해서 들어볼 수 있기를 더 권면드립니다. 굉장히 좋은 강의입니다. 특별히 이 차별금지법이나 평등법이 하나님의 계명에 있어서 무엇과 충돌하는지에 대해서 아주 선명하게 말하고 있습니다. 하나님은 우리에게 또 하나님의 성품은 우리 모두를 이게 외모로 취하지 않는다고 우리 성경에 번역되어 있지만 do not show partiality라는 그 편파성을 보이지 마라라고 하는 것이 하나님의 굉장히 중요한 그 공의의 핵심 개념입니다. 근데 이 편파성이라는 이 partiality라고 하는 것은 이 전체주의적인 사고의 원형인 막스 레니니즘에서 가장 중요하게 생각하는 원칙입니다. partiality, 우리는 이른바 프롤레타리아트의 편에서 파시얼리티를 따르는 것이다. 근데 하나님은 파시얼리티를 따르지 말고 진정한 페어니스와 트루스를 따르다. 이런 부분이 지금 인간들이 추구하는 공의와 하나님의 공의가 다르다는 것이고, 차별금지법, 평등법은 바로 이 성소수자라든지 이런 걸 내세워서 그 사람들에게 너무 불공정하게 대하고 진리를 따르는 성도들과 국민들에게 굉장히 불공정하게 불이익을 가하는 굉장히 악법이다라고 하는 것을 성경을 근거로 또 보편적인 법리를 근거로 잘 설명해 주고 있는 강의입니다. 그리고 이 차별금지 사상과 또 평등법 사고는 세계 최강대국 미국에서도 수없이, 사실은 이 편파적이고 잘못된 법률은 하나님이 우리에게 준 진정한 자유, 특히 핵심인 신앙의 자유를 침탈하고 있다라고 하는 것을 사례를 통해서 굉장히 잘 보여주고 있습니다. 제빵사 또는 플로리스트, 그리고 또 티셔츠를 만드는 사람들, 일상의 삶을 살아가고 있는 성도들이 얼마나 이 잘못된 법률에 의해서 신앙의 자유를 빼앗기고 있는지에 대해서도 말하고 있고, 또 이 잘못된 법률이 인권을 내세워서 우리로 하여금 우리가 믿고 있는 진리를 말하지 못하도록, 우리는 저 사람은 남자인데 분명히 저 사람은 자기가 여성이라고 주장하면 객관적으로 남자를 여성으로 부르도록 강요당하는 이런 잘못된 사고가 법으로 지금 현재화되고 있는 시대에 우리가 살고 있다라는 것입니다. 마지막 벤트렐라 교수의 강의, 변호사님의 권면도 저는 굉장히 이렇게 감명 깊었습니다. 하나님께서는 우리를 훈련시켜서 이 땅에 공의와 진리를 세우도록 하는 중재자로서 함께 일하도록 하신다. 펠로우 워커. 그래서 지금 우리가 진리와 공의를 위해서 싸우는 것은 바로 성도들의 동역이기도 하지만 하나님의 동역자가 되는 귀한 사명이다라는 것을 권면해 주고 있습니다. 여러분, 지금 잘못된 우리의 신앙의 자유, 양심의 자유를 빼앗는 이 차별금지법, 평등법이 주요 선진국을 괴롭히고 있는 이 시대에 이 반성경적이고 반복음적인 불의한 악법과 싸우는 일은 우리나라만의 일이 아니다라는 것이 영국의 안드레아 변호사의 강의와 미국의 한 목사님의 강의와 그리고 미국의 벤트렐라 변호사의 강의를 통해서 우리는 수없이 확인하고 있습니다. 지금 전쟁 중입니다. 미국도 지금 제안된 우리나라의 정의당안과 같은 포괄적인 차별금지법, 평등법안이 제안되고 있고, 그 법안을 막아내기 위해서 미국의 복음주의적인 기독교인들이 굉장히 지금 지속적인 싸움을 하고 있다라고 하는 것을 우리도 지금 보고 있습니다. 여러분, 지난 3주간의 휴방 동안 한국 안에서 차별금지법 막는 운동에서 가장 큰 이슈는 이상민 의원이 발의가 준비 중이라고 하는 이른바 평등법안입니다. 이상민 의원이 여당의 중진 최다선 의원입니다. 민주당 의원들만 규합을 해서 정의당안이 아닌 민주당안으로 내겠다, 이런 시도로 국가인권위원회랑 긴밀한 협력을 하면서 지금 차별금지법안의 문구를 만들어냈습니다. 문안이 성안이 됐고요, 언론에 공개됐습니다. 그리고 지금 지지자들을 모으고 있습니다. 그래서 지금 간신히 10명 넘겨서 정의당안이 발의됐는데 집권 여당의 국회의원들 수십 명을 규합을 해서 발의하겠다는 목표를 세우고 지금 열심히 발의자를 찾고 있습니다. 그러면서 자신이 만든 포괄적 차별금지법안의 이름을 평등 및 차별금지에 관한 법률안 이렇게 해가지고 이른바 평등법으로 불려달라, 이렇게 말하고 있습니다. 그 평등법안을 저희들이 분석을 한 결과 정의당안과 거의 똑같았습니다. 종교단체 예외 조항을 두어서 마치 종교의 자유를 보장하는 것처럼 돼 있지만 그 조항 자체가 굉장히 모호하고 애매해서 실제로는 종교 자유도 보호하지 않습니다. 그리고 고용, 경제, 국가, 사회, 그리고 교육 영역, 사회의 전 영역에서 양심의 자유와 학문의 자유를 이렇게 침탈하는 것을 도저히 막지 못하는 법입니다. 그래서 저희가 지난 12월 16일에 보건법률가회하고 진평련에서 민주당 이상민 의원의 차별금지법안은 정의당안과 거의 동일하고 실질적으로는 반헌법적이고 신앙, 학문, 양심, 언론의 자유를 침탈하는 악법이기 때문에 그 제정에 단호히 반대한다라는 긴급 기자회견을 했습니다. 이 기자회견 동영상이 이 차바 채널 동영상에 업로드되어 있습니다. 224개의 우리 차바 채널을 공유하는 공유 채널에서도 가능하시면 채널 담당자님들이나 또는 목사님께서는 이 이상민 의원 차별금지법안이 얼마나 문제 있는지에 대한 전문가들의 다양한 기자회견 내용이 담긴 이 2시간짜리 동영상을 여러분의 채널에도 또 업로드시켜서 많은 구독자분들이 시청할 수 있도록 해주시면 좋겠습니다. 동영상으로 보는 게 조금 좀 글로 된 그 이상민 차별금지법안의 문제점을 좀 정리할 수 없을까 해서 저희가 보건법률가에서 성명서를 한 4-5페이지 정도 냈습니다. 이상민 의원안은 정의당 안과 이 점에서 동일하고 예외 조항은 허구적이다라는 내용을 아주 집중적으로 요약을 해서 보건법률가에 무려 한 20여 명의 전문 변호사들이 이름을 올려서 공동으로 발표를 했습니다. 그 기사가 보건법률가회 이상민 의원 추진 평등법 이렇게 인터넷에 치시면 12월 13일자로 국민일보의 기사가 있습니다. 거기에 저희의 성명서 전문이 게재되어 있습니다. 그것을 프린트해서 보시면 이상민 의원 안이 얼마나 잘못됐는지에 대해서 여러분 잘 아실 수 있게 되어 있습니다. 당분간 우리 보건법률가회와 또 이 차바를 운영하는 진평련은 이상민 의원이 발의 준비 중인 차별금지 법안, 평등법안이 동조자를 규합하지 못해서 발의되지 않도록 저지하는데 전국의 많은 교회 지도자님들과 교회 조직과 총력을 다해서 지금 막아서고 있습니다. 만일 이상민 의원이 수십 명의 지지자를 모아서 발의에 성공한다면 저희는 여당 안에서도 그 숫자 이상의 반대하는 여당 의원들이 있다라고 하는 것을 서명을 모아서 동시에 발표하려고 합니다. 그래서 이상민 의원의 안이 절대 집권 여당의 당론이 아니다라고 하는 것을 이렇게 보여주기 위해서 지금 전국의 교회 조직과 진평련 조직은 열심히 움직이고 있습니다. 이 방송을 보시는 전국의 성도 여러분, 국민 여러분, 지금 차별금지법 막는 데 있어서 가장 절박한 문제는 이상민 의원의 발의안에 여러분이 있는 지역구에 국회의원분이 동참하지 않도록 하는 것이고, 이것이 발의됐을 때 이것을 반대하는 국회 청원을 추진할 텐데 여기에 여러분이 속한 지역구의 국회의원들께서 동참해 주시도록 하는 것입니다. 여러분이 속한 지역의 국회의원분들을 움직이는 가장 효과적인 방법은 여러분에 계신 지역에 있는 목사님들이 함께 모여서 국회의원을 찾아가서 성경대로 동성애와 성별 전환을 반대하는 것을 말하고 가르치는 교회의 성도들과 국민들을 범법자로 모는 이 악법을 반대하지 않을 수밖에 없다라고 하는 이 절박한 심정을 얘기해 주시면서, 잘 모르는 국회의원들이 많습니다. 국회의원분들에게 협조를 구하시면 대부분의 국회의원분들은 여러분들의 호소를 들어줄 가능성이 많습니다. 그래서 핵심은 여러분 이 방송을 바라보고 계시는 전국의 성도 여러분, 또 국민 여러분, 여러분 지역구에 있는 국회의원들을 지켜주셔서 잘못된 차별금지법 발의에 동참하지 않을 수 있도록 해주시고, 발의되면 반대하는 운동에 동참할 수 있도록 해주시도록 여러분 기도해 주시고 함께 나서서 동역자로 설득해 주시기를 부탁을 드립니다. 이상민 의원의 평등법 발의 반대 운동 상황에 대해서는 매주 우리 차별금지법 강의를 차바 강의를 전후해서 여러분께 진척 상황을 설명드리고 도움이 필요한 사항에 대한 도움을 요청드리도록 이렇게 하겠습니다. 여러분 다음 주 강의를 예고해 드리겠습니다. 다음 주 강의는 윤학열 감독님의 강의가 준비되어 있습니다. 여러분, 윤학열 감독님은 우리 차바강의 동영상 라이트에 이프 패밀리라고 차별금지법이 제정 시행된다면 우리나라의 사회에서는 어떤 상황이 벌어질 것인가에 대해서 이렇게 가상으로 차별금지법의 위험성을 경고하는 드라마를 만들어서 무료로 업로드 시켜주신 우리 감독님이십니다. 이 드라마가 탄생할 때까지 어떤 어려움이 있었고 어떤 하나님의 은혜가 있었는지, 그리고 이 문화사역이 얼마나 중요한지에 대해서 여러분께 귀한 강의를 제공해 주실 것입니다. 여러분, 다음 주 강의를 위해서도 기대해 주시고 함께 또 기도하시면서 동역해 주시기를 바랍니다. 오늘 강의, 벤투렐라 강의 애국의 강의였는데 여러분 끝까지 시청해 주셔서 감사합니다. 여건이 되시면 반복해서 들어주시고 핵심 내용을 여러분 많은 분들에게 또 권면 시청해 주시기를 다시 한번 호소드립니다. 여러분 감사드리고요. 다음 주에 뵙도록 하겠습니다. 함께 잠깐 기도하고 마치겠습니다. 하나님, 2021년 첫 주 차별금지법 바로알기 아카데미 시작할 수 있도록 해주셔서 감사합니다. 특별히 최강대국 미국에서 벌어지고 있는 차별금지법, 평등법, 전환, 하나님 이 진리의 전쟁, 세계관 전쟁의 엄중함을 보게 하여 주시고 이것을 막기 위해서 우리가 하나님의 말씀에 기해서 어떻게 반응해야 할지 귀한 강의 듣게 하여 주셔서 감사합니다. 이 벤투렐라의 강의 한국교회의 성도들 우리 마음속에 새기게 하여 주시고 한국의 교회들과 국민들을 깨어내는데 귀하게 활용할 수 있도록 주께서 함께하여 주시옵소서. 또 한 번 하나님, 2021년에도 대한민국에서 이 부당한 하나님의 반복음적인 평등법과 차별금지법 제정 움직임이 계속되고 있습니다. 이것을 막아내기 위한 전국 교회의 지도자들과 국민들의 하나님 정말 거룩하고 정의로운 운동에 함께하여 주시고 이 차바가 주님의 거룩한 뜻을 이 땅에 이뤄내는 데 귀하게 사용할 수 있도록 함께하여 주시옵소서. 특별히 이 강의를 시청해 주시는 전국의 성도들과 국민 여러분께 함께하여 주셔서 저희가 지켜내고 있는 이 진리와 공의가 이 대한민국을 거룩하게 하고 올바로 이끄는데 하나님 귀한 사명임을 깨닫게 하여 주셔서 주님과 함께 이 땅을 공의롭고 정의로운 세상이 되도록 하는데 동역자가 될 수 있도록 시청해 주시는 모든 성도들과 국민 여러분과 주께서 시종을 함께 동행하여 주시옵소서. 감사드리며 우리 예수 그리스도의 이름으로 기도합니다. 아멘. 여러분 감사합니다. 다음 주에 뵙도록 하겠습니다. 고맙습니다.